We're waiting, you're waiting to find out who the next DA leader is going to be. Is it going to be John Steenhuisen or Mpho Phalatse? And I don't know if you were watching a little bit earlier on, but I think John knows something that we don't know yet. He was walking through the hall like a US president who'd just been elected. The lights were on and people were shouting and celebrating the victory. We don't know, obviously. He took to the stage and he was very bullish, very positive about the DA getting 26%, where the Ipsos poll is still putting them at 16%. They hardly ever get it wrong. So whoever the next leader is has got a lot of work to do before the next elections in 2024. Let's bring in Werner Horn, DA Congress spokesperson, Sabu Galwa, editor-in-chief. Good to have you with us. So what was it, that cocky walk earlier on?
Well, I think it's the confidence of incumbency.
What does he know that we don't know that's going to surprise us?
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows for sure. Of course, there's a lot of belief in the Steenhuisen camp. They've, I think, expressed confidence that John will win with a huge majority. But for now, candidates or their agents, I believe, are still in lockup and their phones have been taken away, so nothing official yet.
Nothing until we know. Sabu, what did you make of that confident stroll?
I think you captured it very well, Jane, in that you had a bullish John Steenhuisen, but I think by all accounts everyone did expect that John would mount a strong campaign in that post-campaign, although she may have had the media coverage, but in terms of the grassroots, I don't think she did enough to convince the members of the DA that she is the leader to take the DA forward. And I think also, if you look at the posture and also John's utterances, John has moved on. He's already talking about 2024. He's not at this conference. You know, this Congress, in fact, if you look at it, the optics of it suggests that it's actually the beginning of an election campaign going to 2024. And I do believe that perhaps it's only a matter of time before we get those results. But John Steenhuisen is already talking coalitions, talking about how the DA ought to behave in 2024. And I don't think that victory walk was a fluke. I think that was deliberate.
Practicing.
Yes, incumbents may have afforded him that, but that was the leader who was well received by his delegates, and also I think that's what we're going to see going forward.
Mpho's camp, if she were to lose, obviously we wouldn't assume anything. I mean, how were they operating within this Congress for the last couple of days? I mean, what's the feeling there?
Well, she's closing remarks yesterday was that she's going nowhere. As somebody who's seen her potential as a politician, I would hope that stays true. If the loss is severe, obviously it will hurt. Nobody goes into an election to lose.
No. What do you make of Sabu's comments about John and the rest of the party already looking ahead to next year's elections? Is that a focus here, that we're already seeing how the DA is going to play out in the next elections, what it's going to do when it comes to power sharing, if that's where we end up?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it was always destined to be a election-focused Congress. The federal executive of the party, who's responsible to convene congresses, took the decision to bring the Congress a bit earlier on in the ordinary 3-year cycle. Exactly because the eye was on election 2024, and a lot of the resolutions as well ultimately the delegates brought them here, but they were all, a lot of them is aimed at how South Africa should look should there be a change in government.
And what do you make of those resolutions? I mean, this one apparently hasn't been tackled because you've been too busy, but taxes on electric cars. I mean, what I love about that is that it's almost like it's going above the quagmire that the country is in. It's already aspiring to lovely things.
It looks like we need to be swapping a lot of mics, but not seats. Look, that very in fact, I was talking now with Werner about it. Apparently, it has been deferred to one of the internal party committees. But I think it also talks to the issues that also afflict I would say the DA constituency. I mean, ordinary South Africans would be saying we still need electricity in our houses, let alone for cars and the tariffs, and also the prices of those cars is a bit hefty. So perhaps maybe that's why that resolution has been put aside for now. But I would say, though, I agree with Werner's point around some of these resolutions being forward-looking, because there was one I was looking at yesterday, which talks about, which was suggested by the federal chairperson, Ivan Meyer, talking about the DA, that it should be on the forefront of putting together a transition committee of sorts, which presupposes that the ANC will lose the election, and that to make sure that there's an easy transitions, the parties would need to come together. And there is also another resolution on coalitions. Although it didn't say much, I think the sentiments on coalitions were carried in what John Steenhuisen said, but I'm not quite sure though. Maybe Werner can enlighten us in that John makes the point that the coalitions that work are the coalitions where the opposition parties are the majority and not a minority, as you've seen in Ekurhuleni and in Johannesburg. But then what I don't understand is what does the DA plan to do about that? How do you turn that around, Werner?
Yeah, well, I think in essence what we've found...
I'm going to have to interrupt you now. I believe that the results are about to be announced in the main hall, so let's listen in.
Midwal, Nicholas Niati, our day leader, and then our cheerleaders, Tabelo, Mokwena, Prudence, Slanyani, and Dikaledi Selowa. A big round of applause to them. But delegates, it's not possible to have a Congress without our DA members, with our DA branches and delegates. You held thousands of compliant and peaceful AGMs. Thank you for peaceful AGMs, unlike in some other parties. You built branches and strengthened the Democratic Alliance. Our constituencies and all our public reps, the AGMs you oversaw, made this Congress possible. And a huge vote of thanks to our provincial leaders, deputy leaders, provincial chairpersons and deputy chairpersons, your PECs, and the various leadership teams, leading 9 delegations of thousands of DA members into the biggest Congress ever. Our 9 provincial directors and staff for election of delegates, compliance, logistics, travel, planning, and the work here at Gallagher Estate. And our Committee of Constitutional Amendments, Resolutions and Congress Awards, Kevin Milam, Gwen Ngwenwa, Matt Cuthbert, and Asher Sarapin. I think they deserve a big round of applause. And so, delegates, our Congress candidate debate moderators, Bobby Stevenson, Anson Dreyer, Belinda Walker, and a special word of thanks to our DA new logo design and treatment used in this Congress, designed by Mr. Craig Fraser. He deserves a round of applause. We also thank those who have made great contributions as service providers to this Democratic Alliance Federal 2023 Congress for audio-visual production and technical direction, Blackbird Production for putting on the show, Gearhouse for oversight of the free and fair elections and the processes here at this Congress, our independent auditors. We would also like to thank our host, Gallagher Estate, and finally, to our federal head office and all our professional staff who committed months of work to planning and operationalizing this Congress, assisted by staff from all 9 provinces. our project leads who were recognized for their talent, attitude, and hard work. Our program director, Matthew Gertzner, he deserves a big round of applause. While you cannot have a Congress without a proper voting roll process, voters roll, voting and delegate management, a huge round of applause to Barney Kruger. Design, branding, marketing, audiovisual, and social media, Amy, Franklin, outstanding work. And then, ladies and gentlemen, during this Congress for the last 2 days, there were live broadcast productions during this Congress on the social media, and therefore, a big round of applause for Azola Mboniswa. Ladies and gentlemen, the first day of the Congress was spent on constitutional matters. The second day was spent on resolutions. And therefore, I want to thank the constitutional amendments and the resolutions official that worked tirelessly, non-stop, Yuan Kutsi. The Congress Awards and special guests, Lisa Balser, Voting Devices, Systems, Technology, Adrian Frith, and I think you will appreciate Wi-Fi, IT, Marianne van Eck. Big round of applause to them as well. Our media operation and journalist support, Ryan Smith, Charity McCord, and Lisa Albrecht. Branding and Gallagher Estate Project, Gary van Wyk, deserve a big round of applause. Our finance and fundraising, you cannot put a Congress like this together without a detailed budget, planning, spending, expenditure control. And therefore, our thanks and appreciation on behalf of the DA Federal Executive and the Federal Council and the Federal Congress goes to Stephen Murphy. The project coordinator, Angelique Isaacs, Gallagher, Liaison and Travel, Logistics, Clint Basson, Office of the Chairperson of the Federal Council, Nicholas Gottschall, Office of the Chief Operating Officer, Rusda Kipi, and then our Chief Operational Project Manager of the Democratic Alliance, who made this possible, who week after week conducted organizing committee meetings, logistical meetings, planning meetings, media meetings, getting political buy-in from her principals, goes to Liana van Wyk. I think we need to stand to show our respect for all of these people that worked over 18 months in making this the best ever Federal Congress of the Democratic Alliance. Thank you. You may be seated. But a Congress is not a Congress without delegates. Your voice mattered at this Congress. That's why you supported some resolutions and amendments, and you have rejected other resolutions and amendments. This is the voice of this Federal Congress. And I want to thank all of you, and my wish is travel safe after the announcement.
Yeah. It's a bit tense in here. Democrats, let's all give one last round of applause for our Congress Award winners. Yeah.
And now we build up to the moment that we've all been waiting for. Your heart is probably sitting here, isn't it?
Yeah, they're sitting
It's
at the
probably
edges of
sitting here.
the
Die sweet tap al soos die val waterdam, né? Yeah. Well, delegates, the votes have been cast, the votes have been counted, and you have made your mark.
Yeah.
You had a date with destiny, and you've made your choice. And you know what, Karabo?
Yeah.
I think our internal democracy is so strong
Yes.
that it continues to stand the test. Congress after Congress after Congress.
Yeah.
And as we continue to build a strong DA, to build a better future, I've got to say that I am so proud of our political party that has such strong internal democratic processes. It is so refreshing.
It is absolutely refreshing, yeah.
Now, are you ready to hear who's been elected? Are
No,
we ready?
we're not convinced. You guys are not ready.
Uh-uh.
Let's give it a bit more ges. Are you ready to hear what the elections are? Okay. Let's start on this side first.
Yeah.
Are you ready to hear what the results say? Okay, the back is a bit tense. Maybe this side has more energy. Are you guys to hear what the results say? That's more like it. That's more like it now. All together as a team, are we ready to know who our leadership is? Great stuff. Let's be tuned and hear what's going on.
Ladies and gentlemen, Democrats, South Africans, the moment you have been waiting for has arrived. The announcement of the elected leaders of the Democratic Alliance. Please welcome to the stage our presiding officer and deputy presiding officers.
Okay. Good afternoon, delegates. Our voting results are in. This election has been the largest and most inclusive election in the history of the Democratic Alliance. More DA members and delegates than ever before have elected the leadership for the coming years towards election 2024. The newly elected leadership have the largest mandate in the history of our party. This election has been facilitated through the OpenVote secure online voting platform, and as with every election where OpenVote has been used around the world, today's election has run 100% according to plan and has satisfied all the requirements of freeness and fairness. Having scrutinized the process, the participation of the delegates, and all the security features in place, I, as presiding officer, in concurrence with my deputy presiding officers, Bridget Masango and Dr. Mimi Gondwe, officially declare the 2023 Democratic Alliance Federal Congress leadership election free and fair. All candidate agents present during the count of the election results have overseen the counting process, and we can announce these results without any objections. Deputy Presiding Officer Bridget Masango, do you concur?
Greg, I do concur 100%.
Deputy Presiding Officer Dr. Mimi Gondwe, do you concur?
I concur.
We can now officially announce the results
of the Democratic Alliance federal leadership elections.
A strong leadership team builds a strong DA. Up first, we have the results for the positions of the deputy chairpersons of the DA Federal Council.
We begin then with the third deputy chairperson of Federal Council. The third deputy chairperson elected by members of Federal Council is Thomas Walters.
We now move to the second Deputy Chairperson of Federal Council. The second Deputy Chairperson elected by members of Federal Council is Dr. Annalie Lottrit.
We now move to the first Deputy Chairperson of Federal Council. The first Deputy Chairperson elected by members of the Federal Council is Asho Sarupen.
Between Congresses, the DA's highest decision-making body is the Federal Council. Next, we have the result for the position of the chairperson of the Federal Council.
Delegates, for the past 3 years, the administration and internal processes of our party have been in safe hands. It is my pleasure to announce and call to stage uncontested for another term as the chairperson of Federal Council, Helen Zille.
Careful expenditure and financial discipline are a cornerstone of the DA. Next, we have the result for the position of the chairperson of Federal Finance.
Delegates, we heard earlier today that the finances of our party are in safe hands. I can now announce that returning for another term as chairperson of Federal Finance is Dr. Dion George.
Supporting the critical work of managing and overseeing structures of the party, next we have the results for the positions of deputy federal chairpersons.
we begin with the third Deputy Federal Chairperson. The third Deputy Federal Chairperson elected by delegates of this Congress is Anton Bredell.
We now move to the second Deputy Federal Chairperson, elected by delegates of this Congress, and that is Solly Malatsi.
We now move to the first Deputy Federal Chairperson. The first Deputy Federal Chairperson elected by delegates of this Congress is J.P. Smith.
Ensuring the DA is democratic and accountable to its members, overseeing the political work of numerous structures and formations, chairing the highest decision-making body of the party. Next, we have the result for the position of Federal Chairperson.
Our Federal Chairperson to chair our party for the forthcoming term, elected by delegates of this Congress, is Ivan Meyer.
Please welcome to the stage the 9 provincial leaders of the Democratic Alliance. Democrats, South Africans, duly elected by the largest federal Congress we have ever had, ready to lead us into the most important election we have faced since 1994, and capable of leading this strong DA into building a better future for all South Africans. It is time to announce the duly elected federal leader of the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, delegates. As presiding officer of this Federal Congress, it is now my profound honor to announce a position of significant importance for our party and this country as the DA continues to grow and as our trajectory sets in onto the union buildings. This person will lead us into the all-important 2024 national elections. The federal leader of the Democratic Alliance is, envelope please. John Steenhuisen.
Viva John, viva! Oi, oi, John, oi, oi! Aê, John Steenhuisen, aê! Oza, John Steenhuisen, oza! Oza, John Steenhuisen, oza! Oza, John Steenhuisen, oza! Viva John Steenhuisen, viva!
Viva!
Viva John Steenhuisen, viva! Asina kulento siyenzayo. Kulento siyenzayo. Once again. Aofa lo dololo. Aofa. Oh, aofa lo dololo. Viva John Steenhuisen, viva!
Viva DA, viva!
Viva!
Pambili DA, Pambili!
Pambili!
Forward to 2024, forward! Pansy corruption, pansy! Pansy ANC, pansy! Forward to the future, forward! Democrats, friends, and to fellow South Africans watching at home, wherever you may be, I am humbled to stand before all of you today to answer the call that you have made during this historic Congress. And my answer to you is a resounding yes. Yes, I will work with each and every one of you to lead the DA into the national government in 2024. But firstly, I want to thank all of those who contested positions in this Congress. We have elections in the DA that are run well, that don't end up with victors and vanquished, and always end up in the best interests of the DA. So to our opponents and all of the races, to all of those who may not get elected, let's work together to build this party and build a better future. I want to thank every DA delegate, every DA public representative, activist, member, and supporter who has placed your trust in me to lead you as your federal leader for a second term. And I pledge to devote every fiber of my being to our shared destiny of boldly taking the DA into the future. In this quest, I will be joined by the rest of the DA's national leadership team that you have elected this weekend. To our federal chairman, deputy chairs, federal council chairwomen, and to her deputies, congratulations. I look forward to working closely with all of you, as well as with our amazing provincial, regional, and local leadership teams to take our party to even greater heights. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the people who often make the greatest sacrifices in the DA's quest to save South Africa. And I'm sure that every person in this room can attest that the DA would never have been grown to become the party that we know today without the unwavering support of each of our families. To my family, my wife Terry, and my three beautiful daughters, Ashley, Caroline, and Olivia, thank you for supporting me and uplifting me along every step of this journey. It is from your unending love that I find the courage to persevere even when the times get tough. Thank you. Democrats, throughout this campaign, I've told you that 2024 is going to be about the DA's moonshot election. Now, while the term moonshot originally meant a long shot, it is increasingly being used to describe a monumental effort and a lofty goal. In other words, a giant leap forward. A leap like ensuring that the DA leads the national government in 2024. And like the original mission to take humans to the moon, we take this shot to defeat the ANC and to keep the EFF out, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Since 2019, we've been working on the first phase of that project. This phase was all about stabilizing and fixing the DA so that we could get back to winning ways on our way to taking our moonshot. It was about rebuilding internal cohesion. It was about discipline, systems, and policy. And as we look back to 2019 today, I can confidently say that this phase was a success. The DA that emerges from this Congress is more united, more confident about the future of the party than at any time I can remember. We have indeed built a strong DA. Yet, as one phase of the journey to our 2024 moonshot ends, so another begins today. This is a phase where we reposition our strong DA to build a better future. In this new phase, the DA and our country will face some of the greatest opportunities, but also some of the greatest risks in our democratic history. The realistic prospect of bringing the ANC below 50% in the next year's national election presents a moment to all of us to radically reshape South Africa and our politics. But it will also be up to us to determine whether this will be for the better, or whether this next era in our country's history will be even worse than ANC domination. And while it feels to so many of us like South Africa has hit rock bottom, there is one unfortunate truth in politics, and that is that things can always get worse. And there is one risk that above all else threatens the future of both my family and yours. And that is the increasingly realistic prospect of an alliance between the ANC and the EFF taking power next year. Given the fact that the ANC now officially co-governs with the EFF in parts of Gauteng, we need to start taking the threat of these parties ganging up to destroy our country in 2024 very, very seriously. And I want to be unequivocal about the DA's view on this. The day that an ANC-EFF government takes over, it will be doomsday for South Africa. And let me tell you, EFF doomsday will make the collapse of Zimbabwe look like a dress rehearsal. And it will leave all South Africans, black, colored, white and Indian, completely destitute and abandoned. And that is why, during the remaining months before next year's election, the DA will also make it our #1 priority and do absolutely everything in our power to prevent an ANC-EFF doomsday coalition from taking power. Over the past 30 years, the ANC has proven itself to be the opponent of progress in our country. But make no mistake, the EFF is its enemy. The EFF Doomsday Coalition will expropriate property without compensation and abolish private property rights. The EFF Doomsday Coalition will nationalize and destroy foreign banks, investments, mines, and other investments in the country. The EFF Doomsday Coalition will plunge this country into ethnic and racial conflict, the likes of which has never been witnessed before. And the cold, hard truth is that the Doomsday Coalition between the ANC and the EFF has already taken over Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni with the help of its little proxies. Next year, it will be knocking on the doors of the union buildings, right next door from us in Pretoria. This fact should send a shiver down the spines of every patriot and every freedom-loving person in this country. But fortunately, there is one and only one insurance policy against the ANC-EFF Doomsday Coalition, and that is to vote for the Democratic Alliance. Because the DA is the only party that's big enough and strong enough to stop Julius Malema. The DA is the only party with the size, the resources, and the track record to oppose and defeat the Doomsday Coalition. And for proof, look no further than the action that we took against the chaos that the EFF threatened to unleash during their so-called national shutdown. It was the DA that took decisive legal steps and mobilized our thousands of branches all across this country to stop the EFF dead in their tracks. And today, I publicly declare Julius Malema's EFF to be political enemy number one of the Democratic Alliance. And I commit the DA to fight back against the EFF at every turn, with the ultimate aim of defeating the Doomsday Coalition that could seal South Africa's fate next year. This is no longer about politics, Democrats. It's about the survival of democracy and the survival of South Africa. Throughout this period of this leadership campaign, I have reflected deeply upon the risk of the EFF coming to power and the demands that this places on the DA. I approach this question in my capacity as leader of the Democratic Alliance, carefully considering what we need to do to maximize our party's support in next year's election. But I also approached it in another way, a way that is demanded of me by our country's constitution. In Clause 57, our constitution recognizes, and I quote, the leader of the largest opposition party in Parliament as the leader of the opposition, unquote. Now, it's a clause that may not be known by many people, but it is one that has profound implications for our moonshot we are about to take to defeat the prospect of an ANC and EFF coalition. As the person duly elected to lead not only the DA, but to also serve as a constitutionally recognized leader of the opposition, I had to consider the way forward, not only for our party, but also for the broader opposition cause. And I have come to the conclusion, fellow Democrats and fellow citizens, that our party has arrived at our Clause 57 moment. And this is the moment that we fully embrace Clause 57 of our Constitution to acknowledge that the DA is no longer just another political party. For the truth is that South Africans no longer expect the DA to be an opposition party only, let alone just one party among many. South Africans now expect us to step up and become the leader of the alternative government in South Africa. What they want and demand of us, above all else, is for the DA to unite all the forces in this country that stand opposed to the ANC and the EFF. What they want is for the DA to lead, and lead is what we shall do. I ask you simply to look at the ANC for an example of what happens when a leader lacks the courage to put South Africa ahead of narrow political interests. Cyril Ramaphosa constantly puts the ANC ahead of South Africa. He even openly admits that he would, and I quote, rather be seen as a weak president than to divide the ANC, unquote. And it is because of this mindset that our nation is rotten with cadre deployment, infected with corruption, and dying from maladministration. And it is because of this mindset that the ANC has embraced the EFF as a coalition partner in Gauteng. Because, you see, for the ANC, politics has become more important than the people. But I'm proud to say that the DA is different. We recognize that if we are to achieve our moonshot, to remove the ANC from power and to keep the EFF out, we will need to think and act in bold new ways. We recognize that one simply cannot achieve something that has never been done before by acting the same way that you've always acted before. And above all else, we recognize that now is the time for the DA to become the leader of the alternative that will change our country for the better, as Clause 57 demands of us. And in the interests of doing what Cyril Ramaphosa cannot, of rising above petty partisan politics, of putting South Africa first, and keeping the ANC-EFF doomsday coalition out, I can today make the following announcement. In my capacity as leader, not only of the DA, but of the opposition alternative in our country, our party will immediately initiate a process to form a pre-election moonshot pact with like-minded political parties, civil society organizations, and civic movements to defeat the ANC, to keep the EFF out, and to inaugurate a new national opposition coalition government. This invitation is broad and generously open to the leaders of all civil society bodies and opposition parties that are, as a matter of principle, opposed to the ANC and the EFF. But it excludes all parties and organizations who've tethered themselves to the rotting carcass of the ANC. The purpose of this pact will to be forge coordination and unity of purpose between all organizations that want to defeat the ANC and keep the EFF out. To achieve this moonshot, we need a whole of society approach that builds an entirely new ecosystem of change in our country. The pact's purpose will also be to sit around the table to agree on the rules of engagement that will enable different organizations to retain their own identities while bringing an end to the petty squabbles and division that only benefits the ANC. Democrats, it's not going to be enough to save South Africa if we just drag the ANC to just below 50%, as that will leave them with too many avenues to stay in power, including through a doomsday coalition with the EFF. But let me be clear, it will also not be enough to form an impotent, unstable minority coalition at a national level. Our experience in places like Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni teaches us that minority coalitions that cannot reach 51% are inherently unstable. And the DA has no interest in destabilizing South Africa through an unworkable minority coalition. What this means is that this moonshot pact must work together to reach the mark of 51%, so that we can defeat the ANC and its proxies and keep the EFF out. It is in pursuit of this goal that the DA takes the bold and unprecedented step to now lead a united opposition moonshot pact. As the name suggests, we're all well aware that this is an ambitious goal, but it is nonetheless a goal worth pursuing. Because in the DA, we are patriots who love South Africa above all else. And because we realize that the mission to save our country from the ANC and its doomsday coalition with the EFF is now urgent. South Africa simply does not have another 5 years to watch opposition parties squabble amongst themselves about whose bucket of water is colder while the entire house is on fire. Now, colleagues, I realize that this is a significant moment, and I therefore want to briefly address in turn the leaders of other opposition parties, the members of Congress gathered here today, and most importantly, the people of South Africa. To the leaders of like-minded opposition parties, I say to you, it's time for a reset. So keep an eye on your inboxes. You will soon receive a letter from my office asking whether you are prepared to join the process of forming the Moonshot Pact. In all sincerity and with all candor, I say to you, we can all continue doing our own things separately and see where the chips fall after voting day in 2024. but hope is not a strategy. And in the past, it has been precisely the lack of opposition, unity, and its infirmity of strategy and tactics, which has allowed the ANC to divide us and rule over us, with the ruin now plain in sight for all to see. Or we, along with civil society leaders and concerned patriots who don't want to walk one more miserable inch down this ANC road to ruin, can choose to charter another path. So let's meet soon at a national convention for the Moonshot Pact, at a time and place where all historic enmity is left outside the door of the venue. I make this proposal to you as the newly re-elected leader of my party. If we're going to make this Moonshot Pact work, it must be an initiative that is actually led by the leaders of all partner parties. We have learned from hard experience that agents or entourages sometimes push agendas that are at odds with the vision of the leader. So this formation must be strictly a leaders-only initiative. Of course, a secretariat will be provided, but all of the negotiations and discussions must be handled by the party leaders themselves. There can be no more important job for any opposition leader in South Africa at this time than this mission of a Moonshot Pact. Let our meeting reach common cause on how we can answer the most difficult yet essential question of all. How can the opposition forces and their leaders ensure that the mightiest possible offer is placed before voters next year to change the face of our government and the fate of our country? And that surely is a question worth answering, a challenge worth facing, and an alternative worth creating. Each party that signs up to our pact should be guided by one central question only. What are we doing to grow the non-EFF opposition vote from the 32% that pertained in 2019 to the 51% we need in 2024? Next to my party, I want to say that we should all understand that there are two complementary, not contradictory issues at play here. As DA leaders, I ask members of this Congress to go out there and win each and every vote that is available to our party. All available polling tells us that on a good day, the ANC is now only the DA is now only 12% behind the ANC. We are consistently polling in the high 20s, and on some days the ANC drops below 40%. I sincerely believe that we can close that 12% gap and overtake the ANC to become the single biggest political party in South Africa by the time the 2024 election rolls round. We are, after all, already the single biggest party in urban South Africa. This means that we govern a number of places, including the Western Cape, with an outright majority. And the fact is, where we have outright majorities, the DA has demonstrated that we govern better than any coalition has ever done. Every objective metric attests to this basic fact. The Western Cape has by far the lowest unemployment in South Africa. It delivers better quality services to the poorest among us, including education and healthcare, than any other province. In the DA-led Western Cape, roads are free from potholes. Refuse is collected on time. Water is safe to drink and always available. And over 1,100 law enforcement officers have been deployed to fight violent crime because the National Police Service cannot. The Western Cape, as well as municipalities with outright DA majorities, like Cape Town, are also going to be the first places in this country that end load shedding for good. And Democrats, it's this message we must take to voters, that voting DA is the best way to secure a better future for you and your family. Don't only tell them what the DA will do, show them what we are already doing. But most importantly, show them that the DA cares. Show them that the DA is the only party fighting to reduce the cost of living, so that poor households can feed their families. Show them that the DA is leading the battle to end cadre deployment and the obscene abuse of the ministerial handbook. Show them that it is the DA that will protect their social grants by getting our country onto a sustainable economic path. Show them that only the DA is fighting to keep the EFF out. That way voters don't only have to believe what we say, they only have to, through their own eyes, see that when people vote DA and give us outright majorities, life gets better. So even as we move towards a national coalition government, we must absolutely retain our majority in the Western Cape and ensure that we win outright majorities wherever they are within reach, including in this province, Gauteng. But as the leader of the opposition, I also know that the DA needs coalitions for the time being if we want to take power at a national level, as we must. And the truth is that we can only become the biggest political party in this country if all other non-EFF voters, including those who may not be DA voters, turn out on election day to drive down the ANC's percentage. Finally, I want to speak to the voters of South Africa. And I know that many of you remain skeptical of coalitions. And this is completely understandable given the way in which fragmentation and side switching by certain parties has undermined the stability of some of these governments. And it is precisely because we've learned some very hard lessons that the DA is now taking the lead to form a pre-election moonshot pact. By getting different parties to make a public and transparent commitment to the pact and the values it will be built on, well in advance of next year's election, we hope to provide greater certainty to opposition voters than was the case before the 2021 election. It's also because we've learned from past experience that we've introduced legislative changes to make sure coalitions work better. But I do also want to point out that there are inspiring examples of successful cooperation between parties that I hope will then guide our Moonshot Pact. And the first comes from KwaZulu-Natal, where a pact between the DA and the IFP has seen us collectively take more wards off the ANC than ever before. In some cases where it's made sense, the DA abstained from particular by-elections and encouraged our voters to tactically vote for the IFP. In other cases, where the opposite is the case, the IFP has done the same for us. And the result of this mature cooperation is that the DA and IFP together are systematically becoming bigger than the sum of our parts in KwaZulu-Natal. Another positive example comes from the Western Cape, where the DA, the Freedom Front Plus, and the local Cederberg-Eerste Community Party have tactically cooperated to win enough by-elections to remove the ANC and its proxies from power in that entire municipality. And I want to thank all of the Democrats who are involved by showing us what can be done when we work together, defeating the ANC and keeping the EFF out. Democrats, our sweet victory in Tshwane that saw Cilliers Brink take up a seat after the ANC and EFF tried every dirty trick in the book, has created an opportunity to demonstrate what we can do when we stand united. Democrats, patriots, and fellow South Africans, this is the DA's vision for 2024, to keep the ANC out and keep the EFF out. It's a vision of a reinvigorated DA that closes the gap with the ANC as we grow our support to unprecedented levels. It's also a vision of a DA that works closely and constructively with our partners in the Moonshot Pact to ensure that collectively we reach the 51% we need to form a government. And Democrats, with the DA at its core, this is a government that will end load shedding. It is a government that will bring unemployment below 20%. It is a government that will halve violent crime. It's a government that will defeat cadre deployment. It's a government that will devolve more powers over many things to capable local and provincial government. This vision is the first prize, both of the DA and for our struggling country. But Democrats, putting South Africa first also means that we must be honest about the profound risks we face if the doomsday coalition comes to power. And there's only one way out. There's only one way to help the Moonshot Pact reach for the stars while simultaneously guarding against the doomsday coalition that is destroying our country. And that way is to vote for the DA. In 2024, a vote for the DA is not only a vote for a strong and stable party to anchor the Moonshot Pact, it is simultaneously a vote to stop the EFF doomsday from engulfing us all. At this election, a vote for the DA will embody our shared hopes for the future, while also guarding against our greatest fears. Fellow South Africans, our country has entered an era of profound uncertainty, and there simply are no guarantees. But this also means that the future is all to play for. And it will ultimately be up to the people of South Africa to decide whether our country goes down in flames under the ANC-EFF Doomsday Coalition, or whether the DA and our partners in the Moonshot Pact give our country its best shot at redemption. So, to the 14 million registered voters who did not turn up to vote in 2021, and to the millions more across the country who are not registered at all, I say to you, your country's future is now in your hands. If you say you're not interested in politics, I say to you that politics will be very interested in you and all you hold dear if the EFF comes to power. So let's not wait until it's too late. Let's use our hard-earned democracy to save our beloved country while we still can. So, if you're not registered to vote, please visit the IEC website today. It takes only a few minutes of your time to register and make sure that you can play your part next year to keep the EFF out and to give hope a chance. If you're already registered, I call on you to check your details are correct and to make sure that you and your family turn up on election day. In 2024, the people of South Africa need to vote DA like their lives depend on it. Democrats, we've built a stronger DA, and this Congress has shown us that. Now let's kickstart this blue machine to provide a better future for my family, for your family, and for every South African family. We don't have a moment to lose. It's time to get out there, to hit the ground running, and to save our beautiful country. South Africa is a wonderful place, and she's worth the fighting for. Let's get out there, Democrats, and make it happen. The road to 2024 starts here.
Oi, John, hoi, hoi!
Hoi, hoi!
Viva John Steenhuisen, viva!
John Steenhuisen there making his first speech as the newly re-elected leader of the Democratic Alliance. So we say congratulations to him. He spent a lot of time focusing on the EFF, calling them public enemy number one. He also spoke about the possibility of a coalition between the ANC and the EFF as a doomsday, and painted a doomsday scenario. He said today he would like to announce forming a pact with like-minded parties, and he would like to lead a united opposition. So he really officially launched his election campaign, didn't he, Spoo?
Certainly, Jane. As I'd been saying earlier on, John is already beyond this Congress. It's already now about 2024. And I think nothing says a launch of an election campaign like that speech, where I would argue that he probably spent 3/4 of talking about what next year looks like. I think there's also a deliberate choice of words in using emotive words like Doomsday's coalition. And I think it was quite bold of him to characterize the EFF as the public enemy number one of the DA, because he is effectively saying, under no circumstances, regardless of what happens in next year's election, will the DA work with the EFF.
Yeah.
And now, in talking about the Moonshot Pact, I mean, as it says, it's shooting for the moon and hoping to land somewhere. Because if you look at the election results of 2019, the ANC won by about, I think they had just about 52% of the national vote. And if you look at the predictions of the polls are putting the ANC at around 45%.
Yeah.
And the EFF seems to be stuck around 10% because that's what they polled in 2021, but also in the 2019 election. And if the polls are anything to go by, they may increase by 13%. So whichever way you look at it, it doesn't look like it's possible to get to that 51% by just being the opposition parties outside of the ANC. But John Steenhuisen, he is the leader of the opposition in parliament, but now he's styling himself as the leader of the opposition parties in South Africa, which I think is also quite a bold statement in terms of how he positions himself going into next year's election.
So he said opposition parties, other smaller parties, look out for the email. What do you think the response would be to this sort of announcement? Who would be keen to join?
Well, the reality is that the DA is already in coalition with a number of parties in various municipalities. Like naturally, they are working with your Freedom Front Plus, with the IFP. I think depending on the day and the circumstances or the weather, they do work with COPE.
Yeah.
Patriotic Alliance, I'm not sure. So there are already these parties that the DA is currently working with in some of these municipalities, and those relationships seem to be working. But what I found interesting though, Jane, is that he is effectively saying the DA is no longer interested, without saying it explicitly, of course, in coalescing just for the sake of keeping the ANC out, which is what has been happening in some of the municipalities that have been unstable, like Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, because in Tshwane the opposition parties have actually that 51%. That's why it has been more stable. What has not worked though, which is not saying, is that the DA mayor in that municipality failed, Randall Williams, which is why we now have Celia Spring. But interestingly, if I heard him clearly, he is saying in any other municipality around South Africa, if the opposition cannot make 51%, and which is not 50 plus 1 actually, just 51%.
Yeah.
If they don't get 51%, the DA is not interested. That will be interesting to see.
And now he's all powerful. He's been re-elected. I mean, we don't know what the split was between him and Mpho. How long will he remain powerful for?
Look, I mean, John currently, I mean, you can say, you saw in this conference, he is effectively, even though there's that hovering shadow of Helen Zille always hovering over him, he's currently the most powerful man in the DA. Just to go back actually to the election results, it is quite interesting and actually quite, I would say, unusual. And I'm still keen to find out why the DA is not releasing the vote split between Mpho Phalatse and John Steenhuisen. Elections have been contested before. With Balintuli, we know that it was more like a landslide.
It's very strange.
And actually, the lack of transparency is quite concerning. What are they hiding within the DA? What is it that they do not want the rest of South Africans and the media to know? That is quite interesting. In fact, currently, as I speak to you, Jane, there is an ongoing brawl or conflict, or actually arguments within the WhatsApp group of the DA, where journalists are asking the question, where are the numbers? And no one is forthcoming with that. But going back to your question, John may currently be the most powerful man in the DA, but it won't be for long. His true test is 2024. Remember that John came in as interim leader in 2019, after 2019 rather. I'm ahead of the time.
Always, Subu.
In 2019, when Mmusi Maimane damned the party, he came in as interim leader and took them to the 2019 election. Now, they dropped. Obviously, because that was Maimane's undoing. They lost the votes. Their biggest vote was in 2014. 2019, they didn't do that well. But 2021 compared to 2016, John didn't do that well either, because he was still 5% less than what they had gotten in 2016. But now, the interesting thing would be, where does John place the DA in 2024? Because that will then be directly compared to 2019. Is he the man to take the DA forward? If he does take them beyond 20%, which is where Musi got them 20.75 in 2014, if he gets to do that, then he's safe. If not, I saw another man here, a short man who's very popular among the delegates, and who has endeared himself. Exactly, Christopher Papas. I mean, already people are saying perhaps this is the next guy. I mean, he appeals to almost all the constituencies. He's openly gay, and also he's white, he speaks fluent isiZulu, and he's endeared himself to the people of KwaZulu-Natal, and I guess to South Africans as well.
All right, let's go back to Helen Zille and what she's going to be up to at the moment. I mean, how they're going to be working together. What's that relationship going to show us?
The reality is that Helen has been pretty much the engine room of the DA post the Maimane era, because Musi Maimane, to be accepted and to be seen as a leader in charge of the party, he actually deliberately went out to sideline Helen Zille and even shut her up, if I may call it that. You'd remember there were issues around colonialism where Zille was taken to a DC, but Zille made a comeback, okay, as Maimane exited. And what John has not been able to do is to shake off the ghost of Helen Zille. And Helen Zille came back here unopposed. Now that speaks volumes, because John Steenhuisen was opposed.
Yeah.
He had another candidate opposing him in Mpopalatse, even though we knew he would win. But Helen Zille comes back unopposed. Now that talks to a powerful leader within the DA. So I don't think Helen and John are diametrically opposed in terms of views. I mean, even coming to this election, there's a small fact that most people wouldn't have realized, is that they actually shared a campaign manager coming into this Congress. So I think the two are actually working together. It may well be that also John relies a lot on Helen Zille, but also in terms of seniority in the party, that you cannot take away. Helen Zille was the leader of the DA when John was still operating in KwaZulu-Natal as a councillor and also as an MPR.
So, Paul, we don't know yet what the split is, and it'll be interesting and revealing, I should imagine. Should we be watching what happens to her now? Will that tell us? Will that speak volumes?
Of course, I think that will be the what everyone is looking at. I mean, most people, or in fact the people, or the person rather, who has contested John before, which is Mbalintuli, left the party, but also we've seen some black leaders of the DA leaving as well. Already there was a lot of unhappiness in Mpo's camp when she lost the mayoral chain in the city of Johannesburg, because Mpo felt that the party did not trust her enough to lead those coalition negotiations, but also that they interfered a lot. And perhaps she may see the party as acting against her, but this was a democratic process. But hey, we don't know. I mean, anything is possible. There's an election coming next year, and she may remain in the DA, or she may join one of the parties that are ideologically aligned to the DA, but are sitting as splinter parties, maybe Action SA, or even Musi Maimane's One South Africa movement. But hey, this is all speculation. But for now, Mpopalatse, what are her prospects going forward? Will they put her up as a premier candidate for Johannesburg to keep her happy? I don't know. But also, to what extent did the relations what's the word, damaged between her and Steenhuisen? We don't know. But we'll see how it goes.
So lots of questions still hanging in the air, and it'll be interesting to know what that split is. Spoo, thank you very much. So John there saying that they're getting ready for the elections. That's the prime focus of the party now. That's it from us. Thanks very much for watching.